Mr. Smith woke up late. His wife was no longer there. She had probably gone to make coffee. He adored his Julia because over the years, despite the fact that they would have had enough money for 10 and 20 maids, she always made him coffee herself. They had been through a lot in life. These were kind of things you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy, but they managed to get through it all. In order not to lose their minds, they both gave themselves to their work. So, their current situation is not an accident, but rather a pattern. Edgar, his wife came into the bedroom. Edgar, look, the video's here. Everything's ready. Oh, that's good. Can't we at least watch a little bit? Well, while we have breakfast. The woman smiled. Sure, let's go to the room. I've already brought breakfast there. Edgar smiled. You know, and I've already got used to the fact that you do everything, as I still can only think or dream about it. Isn't that good? It's definitely a good thing. If anyone knew that you and I were doing so well, everyone would be jealous. But we won't tell anyone, will we? No one. They left the bedroom together. Edgar went to the bathroom, and Julia was busy plugging in the USB memory stick. When Edgar returned, the video was already on pause, and Julia was pouring the coffee. Has Andrew called yet? Not yet. You're crazy. It's only 8 in the morning. They are on a honeymoon. They're out late, sleeping until lunchtime. Julia smiled as she talked about her son. Their attitude toward Andrew had always been trembling. They adopted the boy when he was 5 years old. They moved to another town, and while he was little, they tried in every way to convince him that everything he remembered from his early childhood were just dreams and his fantasy. Andrew believed them, and then he stopped remembering at all. Not once in his life did they even give him a hint that he wasn't their son. They adopted him 3 years after a terrible accident, when it seemed that if there was even one spare moment, they would go crazy. Edgar sat down in his armchair. Come on, turn it on. Julia pressed the button and took a cup of coffee in her hands. Andrew chose a very simple girl. Her parents had died long ago, and her family was kind of disadvantaged. But Emily grew up to be a great girl. Of course, at first they had their eye on her. Gold diggers very skillfully played their roles, but then they realized that Emily had no idea what their wealth was. She guessed that Andrew's parents are very rich, but it was this word very that limited her knowledge about it. Julia was generally delighted with the girl. When the wedding was a done deal, and preparations were in full swing, Julia could not get Emily to buy her a wedding dress. The girl was always busy. One day Julia could not stand it, and began to reprimand her son. Andrew, how come? The wedding is almost there, and we haven't even bought Emily a dress yet. What is she always busy with? Didn't I tell you, Mom, that Emily's working part-time after work? You did, but I thought that was in the past. Why would she work part-time now? Well, she doesn't want to take money from me. She says she's not my wife yet, and she has to support herself. No way, but where does she work? Give me the address. He went to Emily's work that same evening. The girl worked in a florist store on the other side of town. Julia also thought at the time how long it would take Emily to get to her apartment. Edgar and Julia insisted that Emily move into their apartment, which had long been standing idle. Yeah, they didn't think about it. The dormitory was nearby, and the institute was there too. Emily rushed to meet her future mother-in-law. Hello, Mrs. Smith? Is something wrong? Sure it is. I can't catch you to go and buy you a wedding dress. No need to buy anything. I'll do it myself. Julia was a little taken back. Do you have any idea how much does a good wedding dress cost? Yes, I do. The girl smiled. You don't have to worry. I'll buy a good one. I don't go out to work 3 times a week now, but every day. Every day? What about studying? I'm only working in the evening. Julia got confused. How do you always get here and there? Well, sometimes Andrew drives me, but more often, don't be offended, I sleep here, in dormitory. Julia thought for a while, and then got determined. No, my girl, I won't do. I understand that you decided to be all pride and independence, but you are the bride of my son, and I won't let my son's fiancée keep destroying herself and then looking like a haunted horse at her wedding. But, no buts. As soon as you become Andrew's wife, you'll become my daughter-in-law, and therefore my daughter. so there's no need to cross me now. When does your store close? In 40 minutes. Alright, I'll wait. Why? Emily looked at her in fear. Why? Because we'll take your things and you'll come to us. A driver will take you to study and pick you up too. Emily, don't even try. Julia remembered how shy Emily was at first, how she was so scared to look at them. She almost never left the room. Only at the wedding did she begin to speak normally, without a shiver in her voice. While the first scenes were playing on the screen, the phone rang. It was Andrew. Sonny, how are you? Everything's fine. We'll be there tomorrow. We missed you so much. We missed you too. After watching the video for 30 minutes, Mr. Smith said with a sigh, We should go. Let's finish it tomorrow. Yes, I also have to go. Alright, we'll continue tomorrow. And they went their own separate ways until late in the evening. Even though they became millionaires, there was always a lot of work. Mrs. Smith couldn't work well today. For some reason, all her thoughts keep returning to Emily. She could not understand it herself, but something was bothering her, and it began to bother her after she watched the video. What was wrong there? It seemed perfectly normal, as it always happens at weddings. At Emily's side, there were a few girls, and that was it. They somehow modestly sat in the corner at the beginning of the celebration. Of course, there were about 300 invites there, but it certainly was not the girl she was worried about. Something else. In the evening, Julia even came home early. Again, she turned on the video from the beginning. How beautiful Emily was. She was beautiful even in her natural way. Her dark, long hair. She always wore it loose. For the wedding, the stylist made her hair up, and the girl became even prettier. Now, the bride and groom passed by the camera. Wait. Julia turned the video back for about a minute. She heard the door shut, and her husband talking to the maid, but she didn't even turn around. Julia played the video in slow motion. Here Emily came close to the camera. Mrs. Smith caught her breath. Her head began to buzz. She only managed to whisper, Edgar? He was just entering the room. He rushed to her, hearing his wife's voice. What? What happened? Julia stared at the screen without looking away. Edgar also turned to the screen, and Julia pressed the zoom button. Again and again, Edgar tore off his tie and just collapsed in his armchair. That's not possible. Behind Emily's ear, there was a large star-shaped birthmark. It was exactly like the one their daughter had, who had been stolen when she was a year old. They never found any trace of it, though they looked everywhere they could. So far, the police had sent reports to Edgar, but they were all exactly the same. Edgar, what is this? How old is Emily? She's a year younger than Andrew. It all makes sense. It can't be. Do you understand it? So many years of searching, so many people trying to find her, and then she just happens to marry our son? It could be a 1 in a billion chance, and even that is unlikely. They were silent for a long time. Then Edgar looked at his crying wife. I don't know what to do. We have to do the test unnoticed somehow. What if you're wrong? Yeah, maybe. But I'm sure it's her. I'm sure, you know? I'm sure too. But I want to figure it out. Please, please. Don't say anything until the test is done. Okay. The important thing is that she is there. When it's ready, I'll try to find out something about her. Edgar left right away. He turned to his acquaintance, who ran a detective agency. The man listened to the whole story and shook his head. Some strange coincidence indeed. Well, it can't just all be like that. Maybe she's out for revenge. No, I don't believe it. When you get to know her, you'll see she's a very pure person. Alright, go. We'll get to work. 3 days later, Emily returned. The detective called him. They met in the park. Your daughter-in-law has a very close relationships with the institute's administrative staff. They have something in common. I can't figure out what is it yet. Love? I wouldn't say so. She's either afraid of him or somehow related to him. I mean, she's under his influence. Who is he? We're on it now. He's from out of town, and he seems to have a different name. Another day later, the friend himself called. I'm ready to tell you everything. Do you want me to text you or come over? Come. Edgar's voice sounded tired. We got the results of the test. Emily is really my and Julie's daughter. I haven't said anything yet. I don't know how. Edgar knocked on the door of couple's room. I'll ask you to come down. There is a very important conversation. Andrew asked, Dad, did something happen? Yes, but later. Everyone gathered in the living room by the fireplace. The detective looked at the family and spoke. Let me start from the beginning. Many years ago, Edgar and Julia had a daughter. It was a very beloved child, but incredibly capricious and troublesome. The baby could only sleep outside, so Julia constantly took her out to the park. Back then, there was not yet this beautiful house, so everything in public places. Once due to exhaustion, Julia herself dozed off beside the baby carriage. And when she woke up, the baby carriage was already gone. Many people were involved, but the search brought no results. At the same time, a drunken group of people were walking in the park. There was the so-called mother of one girl, who was born disabled because of her mother's way of life. The woman complained to her husband that if she had had a normal daughter, she definitely would have quit drinking. The husband drove the baby carriage away. Near the park was the car of their relative, who quickly drove them to the village. A couple of weeks later, their own child died. They did not tell anyone about it. The girl was simply buried in the garden, and the stolen child took her place. But the unfortunate mother did not give up drinking. Neither did her father, and soon they poisoned themselves and left too. The girl ended up in an orphanage. It seems that everything is clear, but that's where the most interesting part comes in. Someone switched the girl's documents almost immediately after she was brought in. Her name and birthday were changed, so it turns out that this was already the second time. This, by the way, did not arouse anyone's suspicions. It was done by the warehouse man who worked at the orphanage then and now works at the institute. Emily was sitting white as chalk. Andrew asked, And the girl? Why didn't I know anything about her? Where is she now? You will find out soon enough. I would like to show you a picture of a man. He was driving that car. He worked as a warehouse man here. The detective showed the picture. Emily cried out and fainted. Julia ran up to her. Daughter, daughter! Andrew looked at his mother in awe. Daughter? We're married. He grabbed his head. Then he looked at the photo. So this... Emily knows him? This is my uncle, who asked me not to tell anyone that he was a relative of mine. But he was always asking about everything that was happening at your house. And I, like an idiot, told him everything. Emily, he is the one who introduced us. Yes, and he is the one who insisted that I study in this town. God. Andrew stood up. What should we do now? We can't be husband and wife, can we? Emily sobbed. She grabbed Andrew's hand. Edgar stood up. There's probably no point in hiding everything now. Your mother and I adopted you when we thought we were going crazy. So all that I remember is not a dream, as you assured me. Do you remember? Not much at all. Hell. Julia hugged him. It doesn't mean anything. You're still our son. They sat for a long time that night. They talked, remembered, decided what to do next. At night the police called, said that her uncle, Emily's so-called uncle, had been arrested, and asked her to come in the morning to testify. Edgar got up. Let's all go to sleep. You know everything is fine now. My daughter is home, my son is home, and everyone will always be there. And we'll take care of the formalities. It's not a big deal. It's some paperwork that no one looks at. They all embraced and stood like that for a few minutes. Emily snuggled up to Julia and couldn't stop her tears. Neither could Julia. Well, that's okay. Now she can hug her daughter as much as she wants.